Now the next area I'm going to go through is the approvals process. Now during these stages the building control body is the coordinating authority as explained, and their consultation with the fire authority is crucial. It's very important that all parties should respond within agreed timescales and that they should play an active part in maintaining good communication, so timescales, get the information across. The consultation process should be conducted to ensure that both the building control body and the fire authority fulfil their roles in an efficient and cost-effective way. The plan's approval process is likely to be delayed if designs are presented without prior consideration of fire safety. Now, where local authorities undertake building control, there are statutory time limits on the period for consideration of plans, and therefore delays may lead to rejection of plans. So you've got to maintain it within the timescales. Now, the pre-design stage, advice and consultation. At the early stages of a project, the designer may wish to seek advice about the fire safety aspects of the scheme, and involving building control bodies and fire authorities at an early stage can often result in reduced costs for the applicants. However, the advice given by the building control body and the fire enforcement authority does not extend to design consultancy. So they're not designers. The designers have their job. The building control and the fire authority are not designers. The designer's first approach should preferably be to the building control body. Whatever body is contacted first should determine, as far as it is able, which other authorities or bodies are likely to have an interest, and inform the applicant of the necessary application or the consultation procedures. Now, in responding to an independent approach from a designer or occupier for goodwill advice under the Fire and Rescue Services Act 2004, the Fire Safety Enforcement Authority should point out that in respect of the building regulations, they can only offer informal opinions. That's all theirs is, this as an informal opinion. They should refer the applicant to a building control body, and where appropriate, other enforcing authorities, for example, approved inspectors, for guidance on what may be required to meet the legislation for which those bodies are responsible. So don't forget, the fire brigade aren't building control. If the building or part of a building is to be put to a relevant use under the fire safety order, then obviously they will have powers when the building is occupied again, and they will have powers that may influence the design of the building to make sure it complies. In such cases, if there are aspects of the design which follows an unusual or complex approach to fire safety, it may be desirable for the designer to request a joint meeting with the Fire Safety Enforcement Authority and the building control body. In other words, especially if it's going to be a fire engineered design, because there's arguments about whether it complies with the functional requirements. Building control might be happy, the fire brigade might not be. It might go for a determination. So you don't want that issue, especially with a fire engineer design. Now, at this meeting, the building control body should take the coordinating role. Don't forget they're in charge. Now, a record of the main points of the meeting should be circulated to all parties, which clearly distinguishes between the following. What is a building regulation requirement? And what is the requirements of any other legislation, for example, the fire safety order? And also advice which is not enforceable under legislation. In other words, this is good advice to the fire brigade. They might say, we recommend you put sprinklers in, but it's not enforceable under building regulations. So, statutory consultation. Building control bodies must consult with the fire authority if it's going to come under the fire safety order. Whilst the legislation and associated procedures for local authorities and approved inspectors may be different, the purpose of consultation is the same. That is to seek the comments of the Fire Safety Enforcement Authority regarding the fire precautions that will be necessary to meet the fire safety order once it's in use. So that's clear. This should allow them to reach mutually compatible views on whether plans and building work are satisfactory from the standpoints of building regulations and the fire regulations. And in addition to give such comments, the Fire Safety Authority may wish to offer observations to the building control body in relation to building regulations. And these should be clearly and separately identified. Now, consultation also provides the opportunity for the Fire Authority and the Building Control Body to make recommendations regarding the provision of fire precautions that it believes would be advisable, but again, not required. For example, sprinklers. The big impact now we're putting sprinklers in, for example, residential care premises. Now, even if there's no formal requirement to consult, consultation may still be desirable in many cases, such as where the building control body proposes to accept measures which are, for example, unusual or complex, and or where the size or location of the development might have implications for the disposition of fire service resources. And you've also got where the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority is not the fire authority and the size of the location development modifications for them. So in other words, other parties. Now, to facilitate consultation, the building control body will need 2 extra copies of those drawings which demonstrate compliance with Part B. And in some cases, the 2 extra copies will be needed for statutory consultation purposes. So the designer's got to have available an extra 2 copies. Now, in cases where no statutory consultation is involved, the local authority or approved inspectors may still choose to consult the fire authority. Now, under Regulation 14 of the building regulations, if plans are being submitted to a local authority for building work to which Part B applies, unless the building concerned is a house or flat, 2 extra copies which demonstrate compliance with Part B has got to be made available. Under Regulation 13 of the approved inspector's regulations, an approved inspector, when consulting in relation to initial notice or plan certificate, an improved inspector must provide the fire authority, so the Fire Safety Enforcement Authority, with a copy of all the plans with which they relate. And approved inspectors will need to make arrangements to ensure that sufficient copies are available. Now, if the building control body is not satisfied that the proposals comply with building regulations, they may send the applicant a list of amendments or additional information considered necessary. They will not normally consult the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority until they are reasonably satisfied that compliance with building regulations is shown. Now, if the deficiencies are minor, they may decide to proceed with consultation, attaching a copy of their list of the necessary amendments, in other words, which are clearly identified, with the information they send the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority. Now, in some cases, a local authority may be prepared to consider relaxing or dispensing with the requirement under Regulation 11 of the building regulations, in which case additional consultation may be required. Now, once the building control body is reasonably satisfied that proposals comply with building regulations, they will send to the fire authority 2 copies of drawings. And this identifies the intended physical fire precautions together with any supporting documentation that they might consider useful. In other words, anywhere they're going to trade off, put down what the trade-off is, what they've allowed. That might include correspondence that they have had with the applicant, and it may also be helpful at this point that the building control body advise the fire authority of any unusual aspects of design. In other words, how have you got that design? Because the fire authority are thinking, how's he got away with that one? Now, the Fire Safety Enforcement Authority should make its observation or comments to the building control body in writing, and it should be copied in full to the applicant. And again, within agreed timescales, usually within 15 working days, so that building control body can meet its own obligations. Now, the fire authority's comments must clearly distinguish between matters, first of all, which will have to be complied with under the fire safety order when the building is occupied, Next, which will have to be complied with to meet other fire safety legislation other than building regulations. And thirdly, which are only advisory and not enforceable under the regulations. Now, if in the effort to achieve an acceptable fire safety package, the views of the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority and the Building Control are incompatible, for example, as a result of the differing scope of their respective files, if it differs, the Building Control Body and the Fire Safety Authority must seek to resolve the issue quickly and as simply as possible with the applicant. In other words, come on, sort it out. The next area I'm going to look at is the approval of plans. Having plans approved by either the local authority or certified by an approved inspector can give protection from enforcement action where the approved plans have followed the consultation process. A local authority cannot give a notice under Section 36 of the Building Act 1984 requiring alterations if building work conforms to plans that have been approved by the local authority. Now, in cases where an initial notice ceases to be in force without a final certificate having been given, the local authority may not give a notice under Section 36, paragraph 1, in relation to work that conforms to plans that are the subject of a plan certificate issued by an approved inspector. When, after any necessary consultations with the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority, the Building Control Body satisfies that they comply with building regulations, they may issue a notice or certificate approving the plans. Now, where a full plans application has been submitted to a local authority, they must issue a decision notice within the statutory time limit. They may reject the plans, approve them, or issue a conditional approval. Now, if a statutory consultation was involved, the Building Control Body should also send a copy of the notice or certificate or some other mutually acceptable written notification to the Fire Authority. Now, in the exceptional event that the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority proposed to require physical changes, so more physical changes in plans or work that are beyond the requirements of building regulations, the Building Control Body should make the applicant aware. In other words, they're going to say to them, the Fire Brigade are insisting on this, which is over and above the requirements of building regulations. So what about amended plans then? On many projects, the design of a building will change during the design and construction stages. Now, these plans may be amended a number of times before and after the statutory consultation stage is reached. Now, if the applicant submits amended plans following a statutory consultation, so afterwards, and before or after the plans are approved, because of changes relating to fire safety made to the scheme, the Building Control Body should, as a matter of good practice, consult the Fire Authority, even if no question arises of formally approving plans. In other words, you give them the statutory consultation, things are changing, well, let the Fire Brigade know. Let them know the changes that are going to be made. Now, where an approved inspector has been appointed, some proposed changes in a building project may require the giving of an amendment notice to the local authority, which alters the description of the work given in the initial notice. So they use an amendment notice, and that will be sent to the local authority. The approved inspector will then need to informally consult with the fire authority, again, if the fire safety order applies. So they must do it. Building inspectors must also do that. The next area I'm going to look at is determination. Determination, and first of all, let's look at it, the determination with the fire safety order. If the responsible person, being under an obligation to do so, has failed to comply with any provision of the fire safety order and they cannot agree with the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority on the measures which are necessary to remedy the failure, Article 36 of the order provides for a determination by the Secretary of State. In other words, let's go to the Secretary of State and ask them what the issue is. Now, Article 36 may only be used to determine a dispute where the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority and the responsible person both agree that a failure to comply has occurred and agree to refer the question to the Secretary of State. In other words, they both agree, we're never going to come to an agreement here, let's go to the Secretary of State. Where they do not agree, then Article 35 provides for appeals to a magistrate's court. In other words, instead it goes to a magistrate's court. Now, the application for a determination must clearly set out the provisions of the order in issue, the steps taken by the responsible person to comply with the provision, and the extent to which those steps have failed to meet the provision, and the measures proposed by both parties to remedy the failure. So one's going to say, I want to put an L2 system in. The fire brigade is saying, I want you to put a sprinkler system in. So those must be placed on the notice. And the application must also provide the following information. It's going to include the names and addresses of the enforcing authority, the responsible person, and the address of the premises in question, if different from that of the responsible person, for example. It must have a copy of all relevant correspondence between the parties. You must have a copy of any documentation supporting the measures proposed to meet the provision in question, including the relevant guide. What are you applying it on? Is it applying to double line? Is it ADB? So the guide in order of any applicable guidance. Now, the first Secretary of State may require by further notice from either party. So they may require further notice, they may say want more information. And this should be provided within the period specified in the notice and copied to the other party. Once the decision has been issued, the first Secretary of State has no further jurisdiction. Now, the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority, however, may not take any enforcement action if the effect of the action would be to conflict with the first Secretary of State. In other words, if they say it, that's it. That's their determination, you can't issue it. So that's the determination for the fire safety order. The next thing I'm going to look at is determination when building regulations apply. Now, if an applicant and a building control body disagree about whether plans of proposed work are in conformity with building regulations, then the applicant can seek a determination of the question from the Secretary of State, or in Wales it's the National Assembly. The applicant should explain why they consider the proposal does comply, accompanying the statement of case with relevant drawings and a copy of any rejection notice. Now, what about dispensation with the statutory consultation? Now, the local authority is obliged by Section 15 of the Building Act 1984 to consult the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority before relaxing or dispensing with the requirement of building regulations that relates to whether it's structural fire precautions, the provision of means of escape from a building in case of fire, the provision of means for securing that such means of escape can be safely and effectively used at all material times. Now, local authorities should also consult with the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority when they intend to relax or dispense with requirements for B5, which is access and facilities for firefighting. Now, what about alterations notices then? An alterations notice under Article 29 of the Fire Safety Order may be served by the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority in relation to high-risk premises or premises which they consider high risk. And it alerts the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority to any potential changes or problems and allows an intervention before changes are made which will significantly increase the risk. Now, Article 35 provides for an appeal to a magistrate's court by issuing one. In other words, if you've got an alterations notice, you can appeal. And you can go to a magistrate's court, and if you disagree with that, you can actually go higher up. So if you don't want to be under an alterations notice procedure, you can appeal. And it freezes the notice. As soon as you appeal, it freezes the notice. Now, where an alterations notice has been served in premises, the responsible person must, before making any of the changes specified in it, which may result in a significant increase in the risk, they must inform the fire brigade. And the fire brigade can go around there and say, well, no, you're not doing that. And if you are going to do that, we're going to give you an enforcement notice or a prohibition notice. Now, these changes may be changes to the premises, a change to the services, fittings or equipment on the premises. It might be an increase in the quantities of dangerous substances which are present in or on the premises, or it may be a change of use of the premises. Now, an alterations notice may be withdrawn at any time, and for the purposes of this article, the notice is deemed to be in force until such times as it's withdrawn or cancelled by the court under Article 35. Now, the next thing we'll look at is the Housing Act 2004, with the impact on houses of multiple occupation. Now, if a local authority believes that a house in multiple occupation is not provided with such means of escape and other fire precautions as the authority thinks necessary, they may serve notice specifying the work necessary to provide a proper means of escape and require work to be executed within a specified period. Now, before serving any of these notices relating to means of escape, the local authority must consult the Fire Safety Enforcing Authority. Now, the Housing Act 2004 makes important changes to the legislation and guidance relating to houses of multiple occupation. Now, Part 1 of this Act replaces the current standards and guidance under the Housing Act 1985 with a risk assessment procedure. And this is the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. So this is the risk assessment that they use. In other words, you must follow the guidance in the Housing Act 2004. Now, that completes this presentation. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Look on our site for more similar courses.